So in last session, we completed on Friday, Saturday, Spring JDBC module or Spring Boot JDBC module. So it's a very simple and straightforward, and it's very lightweight when it comes comparing with the Java JDBC API. So Spring Boot JDBC API is more easy and more flexible also for a developer to use the JDBC functionalities. So it's all about creating an object, bean object for the JDBC template. And by using JDBC template bean object, you are going to call all, or you are going to execute the database queries based on the requirements, all DML queries and DDL queries, whatever it is. So here, so we take an examples for all code operations by using JDBC template. It's a very straightforward. Especially when you are using Spring Boot JDBC, there are nothing much to do in Spring Boot JDBC. Just a simple thing is create JDBC template object wherever you want, dependency injection point of view. Even you don't need to configure JDBC template object also in this case. So the reason is this object is created, this bean object is created by the Spring Boot container internally. So I shown you the details also in the last session by opening the debugging logs. I shown you that details also. So this object is automatically created by the Spring Boot container or Spring container internally in Spring Boot framework by taking the database details, whatever we given here. So internally, it will create a data source object, and the data source object being passed to this JDBC template. And finally, they are creating JDBC template object. So as a developer, our responsibility is just making auto wiring of that bean object. Nothing but we are asking the dependency injection to the container, like in this component class level, injecting this dependency bean object. Okay, so this is all we discussed, and we completed update operations, delete operations, even we completed row mapper concept also in the last class. So whenever we are executing select queries, you will get multiple records, and whenever you want to consider those records as a list of objects, you can use row mapper concept. And as part of the row mapper, you have to use one predefined, one Pojo class name here, or you have to define a Pojo class based on the property names what you are having in the database table level. So you have to use all those details. So this example also we completed with respect to select query and row mapper point of view. Okay, so today we are continuing our things with this Spring Boot JPA module. So I told you already, in the real-time perspective point of view or real-time applications point of view, people will use always most of the times JPA module, not the JDBC module. So that's why we have to focus more and more on the data JPA module. So what is the point of JPA module? Why this is much important than the JDBC? Why people are using JPA module instead of JDBC module in real-time applications? We have to understand here it is. Okay, so let's see details more about JPA. It will take another 1 week sessions, minimum 1 week, 10 classes it will take, but no problem. We'll continue. We'll see everything. Okay. So first of all, what is the difference between JDBC and JPA? We have to understand. So we are saying like JDBC point of view, we have knowledge like we discussed in the advanced Java and then Spring JDBC, whatever it is. But what is the concept of JPA and JDBC versus JPA? And sometimes people will call the same module as a ORM module also. So same thing we are going to consider as a ORM module also. So that means again here, what is a ORM? We have to understand. And JPA versus ORM, we have to understand. And there is and sometimes when you are attending the interviews and all, people will ask about Hibernate also. So that means, again, what is the Hibernate? We have to understand. And again, JPA versus Hibernate. So these are all details we have to understand one by one before entering into the programming by using Spring Boot data JPA module under. Okay, so let's see all this discussion first of all, and then we will enter into the programming concept. Okay, so as per our application architecture, we know that it's all about in Java application point of view, especially backend point of view, what we used to do, we will have our Java programming language, Java logic. Simply, I can call it as Java programming language. And then by using Java programming languages, by writing Java programs, what we used to do is we used to connect to the databases. So we'll establish connections to the database and we will make all the code operations by using Java programming language, whether it is a JDBC, whatever it is. So JDBC API, and even we understood now Spring Boot JDBC API also. So finally we are able to make a connection to the DB, and as well as yeah, we can do all the operations from the DB perspective. So this is all we are doing every day with respect to JDBC and database operations, so that we are executing all code operations like create, read, update, delete operations. We are able to do all the SQL queries we are going to execute from our Java programming language perspective. So here again, what is the concept of JPA? When you are able to do something already with JDBC, then what is the point of JPA here? Who provided this JPA? Okay, what is the idea behind JPA? And okay, so let's understand here. So first of all, the JPA stands for, earlier the former old name is called as Java Persistence API. Java Persistence API. Okay, but nowadays the Java is handling by one more organization called as Jakarta. So that's why instead of Java Persistence API, now the recent name it is modified as Jakarta Persistence API. So JPA earlier used to call as Java Persistence API. Nowadays the latest name it is modified as Jakarta Persistence API. So the name stands for Jakarta Persistence API nowadays, not Java Persistence API. Even people, someone else pronounced as Java Persistence API also, same thing. Both are representing same thing. Okay. So this is the name stands for. Now the point here it is, what is Java Persistence API or Jakarta Persistence API? Who provided this? And let's understand. This is this, I mean nothing but JPA. JPA introduced by Java language only. So I'm writing in a simple terminology. So this JPA point of view is introduced always by the Java language team. So let me give some points here. Jakarta Persistence API, or sometimes old name point of view Java also. And this JPA is introduced by the Java language. So that means it's from the house of Java language only. So that means the JPA concept. Leave about Spring Boot JPA. First concentrate on what is JPA. Okay. After that we'll enter into Spring Boot JPA. First of all, we are understanding as an individual point of view what is a JPA. So JPA is not a concept from the Spring or Spring Boot. So JPA is already a concept or an API which is given by the Java language team itself. So from the Java house only. So now here again I will ask you one more point. What is an API? So we know very well about API. API is all about a set of predefined classes and interfaces. Classes and interfaces. So that means under this JPA, Java language, given some set of predefined classes, interfaces, all these things, okay, with respect to database operations. So to do database operations instead of JDBC API, Java language provided JPA API also. And as part of JPA API, okay, so it's all about again to do only database operations. To work with database operations, Java given one more solution called as JPA. So as part of JPA, whenever I said like API, Java Persistence API, API is nothing but a set of predefined classes and interfaces. That means which are provided by the Java team like that. Okay, fine. Now, when already JDBC is there, why Java given again a concept called as JPA? So what is the reason behind JPA? When already JDBC is there, why Java given again JPA here it is? Yes, the reason is the main agenda of JPA here it is. Whenever you are using JDBC API, okay, whenever you are using JDBC, especially leave about Spring, okay, this concept is without Spring framework or Spring Boot itself existed. So the moment you are using JDBC API, what you are doing? You are sending the SQL queries. You are sending the SQL queries always 100%. 100% you are writing the SQL queries. Like for any operation, you are writing select star from, delete, insert into, update, like that. You are writing all these select queries as well as update queries, insert queries, and as well as delete queries. So these are all four basic fundamental operations generally we will do with respect to database point of view, and we are writing always SQL queries to do any operations on any table, and we are able to execute everything, and we are able to make the logic execution. And finally, Java connected with the database and doing all these activities. Now the idea of Java language here it is, or Java team here it is. When Java developer, when as a Java developer, we are implementing the Java logic. So here it's all about we are writing Java logic plus SQL queries. So it's all about Java logic plus SQL queries. So we are writing Java logic plus SQL queries here and to do the database operations. Now here the Java team idea here it is, when Java developers are implementing the Java logic, so they should have idea of SQL language also, SQL knowledge also. So you are using in this case SQL queries means SQL language. So Java language plus SQL language point of view, you are implementing all these queries and you are making database operations. Now what Java thought here it is, as a Java developer, whenever they are implementing the Java logic, okay, so what is the purpose of writing SQL queries? Why can't we make something? See, Java is, again, there is a concept called as Java is object oriented programming language. Java is object oriented programming language. So that means what is the point of object oriented programming language? In Java, for everything, if you want to do some operation, if you want to do execute something, we will create an object, and by using that object, we will call the methods, right? And we will execute the logic. So that means most of the times in Java, we will create always objects, and by using objects only, we will do so many things in Java language. Now the point of Java team here it is, why we have to encourage SQL queries to do the database operation by the Java developer. Why can't we make something in place of SQL queries, like for example Java, I said right now, right, Java logic plus SQL queries. So their intention here it is, replace why can't we replace this SQL queries, whatever developer being used or implemented here for a data basic operations point of view. I mean, their idea is like this. Why can't we override this SQL concept also with some kind of Java topic itself? I mean, here also we will use some again same Java related things only, but still we have to make the DB operation. But still we have to make the same database operations. But the problem here it is, again, database will understand always SQL language. Database ultimately understands only SQL language. Database always understands only SQL language. So then, if you are writing everything in Java other than SQL queries, instead of SQL queries, you somehow you manage everything with the Java, but database cannot understand the Java language. Database can understand only SQL language. So in earlier JDBC point of view, what you are doing? By using Java logic, you are sending only SQL queries to the DB. So ultimately what's happening, by the time something is, by the time something happening on the database, the SQL queries, whatever you written, that is what being executed in the SQL language. But this time, instead of instead of SQL queries, we are managing something with the Java itself. I'll come back, what and all. But the moment you are sending same thing, for example, you want to load data from a employee table. But here you are not sending any SQL query. You are managing some Java topic and all, and you are sending that information to the DB. But database cannot understand your Java instructions. Database will understand only SQL language. Nothing but you, until and unless you are sending the real SQL queries, database level you cannot do any operations. But so in this case, what Java thought here it is, they came up with a concept called as JPA concept. Okay, Java Persistence API. So here the word persistence represents the database, guys. So here the word you are seeing persistence, right? Generally, the persistence word, persistence layer, people will use related to do database operations. Generally, persistence is the word in our IT industry or in our application development point of view. The persistence word being used along with the database layer. To represent database things, generally people will call it as persistence things. Okay. So that's why Java persistence is nothing but kind of storing the data, retrieving the data. Persistence is nothing but storing, saving, something like that. Persistence meaning is storing, saving, something like that, retrieving all this. So it's all about Java persistence API is nothing but it's all about dealing with the database only. This API only specific for to do the database operations in a simplified manner. So what in this case Java team thought here it is, let's make everything in the Java point of view, especially there is a concept available called as ORM concept. So that means to achieve this ORM functionalities, to achieve this ORM principles, so by using JPA, what Java doing here it is, they came up with a concept called as ORM principles or ORM concept, ORM framework concept here it is again by the Java team. So that means what Java is doing in this case is, as a Java developer, whenever you are writing Java applications going further, you can write everything in the Java. Okay, even though the database operations, whatever you want to do, write everything in the Java itself by using JPA concept. Everything you will write 100% Java logic here. There is no point of writing. Their intention is there is no 100% Java logic. But actually has to be done database operation. But DB can understand only SQL language. DB can understand only SQL language. So then how we are going to make sure the integration or the communication between Java program and database point of view by using JPA is all about by using some principles called as ORM principles. So what is the ORM principles again? Here it is. ORM stands for again. So here again ORM stands for object relational mapping. Object relational mapping. So now if you taken this formation again, word formation, okay, so object relational mapping. So again, if you taken these three words, if you observe here these three words, object represents Java. Objects represents Java. Relational represents database. I think you heard in your education time also or somewhere else, probably who studied computer science especially. So there is a concept called as database management system, DBMS, and that will be called as relational database management, RDBMS, relational database management system. So nothing but my point here it is this relational word representing the database. And mapping is all about you are making a mapping in between Java versus data. So that means finally what is this ORM is talking about? The mapping between Java and database. So Java and database point of view. So Java language perspective, and that too you know that Java is what object oriented programming language. So Java language is nothing but object oriented programming language. So that means in Java, if we want to do something, we will create always objects. By using objects, we will do everything. We will execute the logics, whatever we defined as part of the methods. So now what ORM is saying is, here it is. Somehow there is a concept available, ORM principles. I will explain right away. So by using that, you are making a connectivity between Java and database by using ORM concepts. By you are making a connectivity between Java language or Java concept versus database point of view. So in this case, how JPA is designed as, now same the Java team, how when it comes to JPA perspective, what they are saying is JPA is a specification. I'll give you some points here, then we'll understand the relation between JPA and ORM. So JPA is a specification. JPA is a specification. Okay, leave about spelling mistakes. JPA is a specification. Okay, which talking about ORM functionalities. Which talking about ORM features or functionalities, whatever it is. So what is the point of specification? Again, here it is. So I used a word called as specification. And I said JPA is also an API. And JPA is a specification. So nothing but here generally the meaning of specification is nothing but a set of rules and instructions, a set of rules, instructions, okay, guidelines is called as is specification to do something, to do a task. Okay, generally we are providing a specification is nothing but we are providing a set of rules, some set of instructions, set of guidelines to achieve some task or to achieve some functionality. So that means understand this thing again here. The Java team, whatever JPA they given, they are not given solution, guys. They are not given solution. Whatever they are trying to make something like object oriented programming features and all, they are not given 100% solution. They given only a rules, set of instructions and guidelines is to achieve the ORM functionalities. To achieve the ORM functionalities. And ORM functionality, what it is saying, it's all about the ORM functionality, what it is saying, it's all about you are writing everything in the Java, but still you will make database operations with the database. But still we are going to make DB operations with the database. But the point here it is Java language you writing 100% and you are sending, but database can understand only SQL. So then what will happen in this case is so in this case what's going to happen? Let's understand. So what ORM generally the ORM object relationship mapping principles is saying is in a Java application, especially in Java point of view, object oriented programming point of view, what it is saying is you know that right whenever it is a database means tables. If you are having a database point means it's all about table. So it's a database, nothing but you will have in the database level tables. You will create always tables. Now assume I have so many tables in my database. One is employee table, like product table, order table, department table, whatever it is. These are all like etc. 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 tables point of view. So employee table, department table, product table, whatever it is. Okay, fine. And you know that every table will have a columns also. So column number one, column number two, like employee ID, employee name, employee salary, employee department, employee manager, etc., etc., etc. You will have always columns. You will always have a columns. And as part of this column, generally what you will do, you will store the data. That is the purpose of database. That is the purpose of database. Like you are going to store the data like employee one, Dilip, something like that. One and so and so person, ABC, salaries, so and so salary, and remaining other data, whatever it is, you will pass. Second row, second person information like B and so salary and so data, other data point of view you will enter. So that means now once you created a table with columns, you will start inserting the data, you will start saving the data like that. So you will start storing multiple records as part of the table. Like for every table you will do, that is the purpose of database. Now what in this case object relational mapping principle is saying is with respect to Java language, it is saying like, and I said Java point of view, you have to write everything 100% as object oriented, right? So what it is trying to say here, it is you make sure Java logic solutions everything as 100% as object oriented without SQL. So that means no SQL queries. No SQL queries point of view. Make sure Java 100% object oriented. So make, for example, you want to insert product, okay, employee information, double one, Dilip, salary, something like 1,20,000 or whatever it is. So this information we have to insert. Now, generally what we will do, we will take a insert query, insert into employee and followed by values, like we will pass these values like double one comma, Dilip comma, and something like we will pass all the values and we will trigger this SQL query to the DB. We will send this SQL query to the DB. We will send this SQL query to the DB. But now object oriented programming principle point of what it is saying, there is no SQL query. It is saying like make something everything via object point of view. So that means what it is trying to say here, it is keep your data as part of the object. So that means write a Java class like product, employee information, something like that. Create an object for the employee class. Okay, create an object for the employee class and put your data ID equal to double one and name as Dilip, employee, set employee name, set salary like 1,20,000. Like that, you can put all the data into a Java object. So what is this? This is an employee object. Employee Java object. So that's what the ORM principle is saying, is all about object relational mapping. So now this is a database, this is a Java, and this time it's not an SQL query. When you are using JDBC, you are directly sending SQL query to the database, there is no issue. But this time the object oriented programming principles on JPA is saying like don't write SQL queries and make everything object oriented. So that's why you kept this data as object. You kept this object data as a Java object. But if you are sending this object to the, if you are sending this object to the database level, if you are sending this object to the database level, database cannot understand Java language. Database can understand ultimately SQL queries only. So database will understand only SQL queries, but you are sending, you are trying to make everything via object oriented without writing SQL query. So in this case, what JPA is saying is, if you are taking my specification and my implement, okay, and based on the specifications, okay, if you are implemented some solutions, those are all called as ORM frameworks. So that means I said right now, right? JPA is a specification. JPA is not a solution. So that means in this case, JPA is not a solution, 100% implemented solution. 100% implemented solution. So that means JPA is giving an idea, but JPA is not giving solution based on that idea. So what JPA is saying is, I'll give you some set of rules and instructions and guidelines as part of API, like some predefined classes and interfaces level. I'll give some instructions. Based on that, if you follow my instructions, specification and everything, okay, so you can achieve the ORM functionalities in your project. Nothing but without writing SQL queries, the moment you given an object to the specification and the solution called as whatever it is based on the JPA specification. So here JPA specification point of view, whatever the implementation you are having, implementation, whatever the implementation as a developer, if you are doing all this specification. So as a developer who has to implement this JPA specification is in our application, we have to do that. In our application as a developer based on the JPA rules and regulations, as a developer, if you are implemented the JPA specification, so that without writing SQL queries, what we are going to do here it is by using this Java object, so we can pass this. Okay, so what's happening? We will not pass Java object here it is. So what in this case JPA is saying is, if you are following my JPA specification and all, as a developer in Java program, he will send an object, but you have to write an ecosystem in this case, like taking the Java object, taking Java object and convert it into respect to SQL query, and I mean here Java, while you are sending this object itself, you will give an you will give an instruction to the JPA implementation, like please save this data. So if you are giving an instruction like save, or if you are giving an instruction like update, or if you are giving an instruction like delete data, update data, like that, based on the instruction whatever you given. So what JPA specification is saying is, as a developer you have to implement this specification, like taking the object and based on the instruction converting, okay, and convert it into respective SQL queries. So that means now the moment I given this information, like, okay, so let's see like this. The moment I give an employee object, the moment I give an employee object, and if I'm asking the JPA, could you please save this information? So save of employee object. So I'm just asking save it. The moment you given instruction as save and an employee object, in this case, what again based on the JPS specification, whatever the solution you implemented, what has to be done here it is. Okay, you understood, like, okay, it's a save, right? And this information has to be inserted into DB. And SQL database will understand always SQL language only. So in this case, this mediator, this frameworks or this JPS specification point of view, whatever the solution you are implemented, what it has to do is, it will take employee ID okay, 11, employee name Dilip, employee salary 1,20,000, and you have to form an SQL query automatically like this. So that means this is what I said here it is. This is what I'm trying to say. The moment you got an Java object and you got an instruction, based on that instruction, you have to prepare a query dynamically. So in this case, you have to prepare a query dynamically. So you have to prepare a query, SQL query. Dynamically you have to prepare, and then that SQL query you have to send it to the DB. Then that SQL query you have to send to DB. So that means in a Java language perspective, as a Java developer perspective, in this entire ecosystem, if you observe, in this entire ecosystem point of view, if you are understanding what's happening, you are sending Java object. Okay, you, as a developer, you are just sending a Java object, but internally, the moment you, if you are taking JPA specification into your application, and if you implemented some solutions based on the JPA specification, and then what you have to do, that Java object has to be converted into respective SQL query, and that SQL query should go to the DB level. So that means ultimately database level, again you are executing SQL only. Now database can understand SQL. So that's why database will execute that SQL query, and finally this data will be inserted into DB level like 11, Dilip, and followed by the values whatever you given. So it's similar point of view sometimes read operation also. So you want all employee objects. So all employee objects. The next requirement is what? You have to load all employee objects. So the number of records available in the DB, all the employee records you want. So in this case, again what you will do is, in this case also, you will send an instruction, you will create an object like employee object. I'll tell you what is the point of employee object, simply point of view. Sorry, employee object you will create, and you will say like load all. I want all objects. You are giving an instruction like by using employee object, you are saying like I want all objects. Then based on this again, the mediator framework, whatever JPA solution what you are going to implement, that should understand, okay, this guy won't load all employee things. So that means dynamically what it has to do is this solution, it has to generate an SQL query like, so what is the instruction this time? Load all. Earlier it is save. That's why insert query. Save. This time load all. So based on the load all point of view, this framework has to generate one more SQL query dynamically like select star from employee. Why it written star? The reason is you said all employee objects and you given, so that's why select star from employee. Now again this SQL query is going to send it to the DB level. And then the case in the DB, by the time it is reaching to the DB, it is again SQL query only. So as a developer, you are writing only object oriented solutions, but based on the JPA point of view, you have to write some extra solutions, and you have to make sure converting that objects into respective SQL queries and then sending SQL queries to the DB. Now in this case, once this query is executed, what will happen? All employee records came as a result set. Even we saw yesterday in the row mapper, right? In the Spring Boot JDBC module level, we understood a concept called as row mapper. So what I said in that concept, when it comes to row mapper, yeah. So this is what. That's why I told yesterday. I mean, when I am explaining this. So what's happened in this case? The every record, generally we, as part of the row mapper, what we did, every record we converted as a single Java object point of view. 10 records are there, 10 objects. 1000 records are there, 1000 product objects. Same perspective now here also. What JPA specification is saying is, so in this case, what the request is loading all the employee objects. You say finally, based on that instruction, SQL query is generated and sent to the DB, and DB executed that query, and it given all the employee records back to the Java logic. So again, the moment all the Java, okay, all the results set. So in this case, generally in the JDBC point of view, you will get what? Result set. And that result set immediately should be converted to, all the table records should be converted to an array list of objects. So that means by the time wherever you called load all method, the return type should be array list of objects. So the return type should be list of objects. So it's a pure Java objects. So as a pure list of Java objects point of view, you have to get all these database records. Each record should be converted as a object, and every object being added to an array list, and finally that list has to be written here. So that means what is the point you have to understand? As a developer point of view, you are sending an instruction like load all employee data. So that's what you given the instruction. You are not written in SQL. No SQL query. No SQL query. You written an instruction in the Java language perspective. I want all employee objects, and you are not sending any SQL query. But in this case, you have to implement a JPA implementation based on the JPA rules and regulations point of view. And that will go to the JPA, and JPA is converting that instruction to SQL query, and this SQL query finally sent to DB. This SQL query sent to the DB. But the point what you have to understand here it is, as a developer, you are not written SQL query. You given only instruction in a Java language perspective. I want all the employee objects. Then JPA, and you are passing that instruction to the JPA. And JPA is saying, okay, I will do that. Like it is converting your instruction into SQL query and it is sent to the DB. Once DB executed this query, a regular SQL query select star from employees, assume 1000 records are there. 1000 employee information is there. Then what will happen? Automatically DB will select, yes, 1000 records are there. It will try to pass this 1000 records to the caller wherever you requested all the objects, right? But again in this process, what JPA specification is doing is, JPA is saying like all object oriented solutions, object relational mapping. Everything should go as an object, everything should come as an object. There is no intervention of SQL. That SQL should be abstracted. That SQL generation, SQL queries should be abstracted. It should not be developer point of view. Developer should not write any SQL things. Developer perspective, he sent a Java language instruction. Everything is executed. Even this 1000 records also, whenever you are returning back, written as a Java object. So that means what in this case again JPA specification is going to do is, what JPA is saying it is in this case is the moment you got 1000 records, again it's a those 1000 records objects, step number 2, what it will do is, yeah, so what it is going to do here it is, it will convert those 1000 records into an array list of objects. So how it is doing array lists of objects? Yesterday we know that, right? In the JDBC also we understood a concept called as bean row mapper. So internally what JPA is saying is, by using some row mapper concepts and all, make sure all the records are converted into an array list like this. So now in this case, what? Finally by using row mapper, whatever the concept is, you are getting what? An array list of objects. So again the conversion is doing by JPA again here. So that means what you understood again here it is, the moment you are inserting data, the moment you are loading the data, you are sending Java instructions, and internally based on the JPA specification implementation and all, JPA is saying like, then convert it into SQL query, send SQL query to the DB. Now after that DB is giving any information also, again convert that data into a regular Java objects and pass to the Java. So that means as a developer logic perspective in this case, we sent Java instruction to get data from the DB and we got again Java objects back. But in between that, but the beyond that, the concept, okay, behind that, what's happened? The Java instruction converted to SQL query and then sent to DB, and DB executed on DB level, that query is executed. Again records came, result set came, and that result set is again converted into array list of objects. So that means as a developer you written this logic, but behind the scenes this is all happens. So that means object to Java to S. Okay, so simply I will write like this: Java instructions to SQL queries as well as SQL queries to Java content. So Java content to SQL, SQL content to Java. This conversion is happens based on the JPA. So what is the advantage of all these things is, that's what you are making your Java application 100% as object oriented solution instead of involving the SQL queries in this case. But the problem here it is, some mediator should we have to implement based on the JPA specification. I said as a developers we have to implement this solution based on the JPA specification. We have to implement this solution. Then only you can achieve all this functionality without writing SQL queries. You are going to achieve all this functionality in your project. But the next problem here it is, as a developer, when you are working for a software application, for a client application perspective, if you started working based on the point what you understood right now, I said right now is you have to, this is pure business point of view logical, right? And I said you have to implement some JPA specification, implementation of JPA specification. So that means as a developer again, if you concentrated on implementing JPA specification to use JPA module or ORM functionalities into your application, this itself will take sometimes 1 year of time. Then when you will implement the real time, when you will implement the real time client requirements, adding the employees, deleting the employees, adding the products, deleting, all those are all real business requirements. So first of all, based on the JPA specification, if you want to implement the solutions, this layer, it will itself will take longer time. So then when you will implement the real functionalities to use the ORM functionalities in our project. That's why in this case, what happened here it is in the market, whenever JPA released into the market by the Java team, JPA released into market by Java team by explaining all ORM functionalities. If you are doing what and all, how you are going to achieve ORM functionalities, right? Without writing SQL queries, how you can make the database operations from a Java project like that. They're given a longer specification and they're given some set of predefined classes and interfaces. They released into the market with a specification. That means in a document. Specification is nothing but a set of rules and regulations document they released into the market. Now the moment they released this into market, okay, what some companies are done here it is they started providing implementation to this JPS specification. So what? Some third party companies started providing implementation. So implementation to JPA specification. So JPA specification. So what happened? Implementation to JPA specification. And those are all called as ORM frameworks. So it's all JPA talking about what? ORM futures. ORM futures. So it's all about making relationship between data and Java is all about making only via object point of view. So that means it is talking about ORM features, but it's not given the solution. It is saying like, okay, man, if you are doing this, you will get that benefit. If you are doing that, you are going to get that benefit. Like that, it is just given a specification. It's not like I did so many things for you, take my solution, you will get the benefit. It is saying like you do, you will get the solution. Like that, it is given all these specifications. So based on that specification, some third party companies implemented all these solutions and those are all called as ORM frameworks. So the solutions of JPA specification is called as ORM frameworks. Now you know that framework is nothing but what? Solution. So JPA is a specification. That means a set of rules, but not real solution. I mean, it's not an implementation. But whoever provided implementation, then nothing but they provided all the logic, written this lot of logic, and they provided all ready-made solutions are ready like that. And it's all about ORM framework. For example, assume guys, I'll give you one more small information here. It is. For example, assume you have an interface like this in Java, core Java point of view, interface calculator. Okay, and the moment I define interface, assume I defined a method here, add int a comma into b, subtraction point of view also, int a comma into b, something like that. Now I told if you take in this interface, can we really add the values? Can we do the real addition and subtraction operations in this case? Real addition and subtraction operations in this case, guys? Can we do real? That means can I pass 10 comma 20 so that, and I'm asking to the add method, can I get 30 in this case? I'm going to get 30 in this case. No, right? Why? It's a specification. It's a interface is all what a specification. It is saying like, as part of this add method, take two integer variables and write some logic. Once you return the logic, then if you are passing the real values, and then you will get the real solution. So that means based on this specification, you cannot do this real operation. You cannot do this real operation. Now the same interface if I am taking, and one class ABC class came into the picture, ABC implements calculator, something like that. The moment ABC implemented, now ABC return the logic like add integer a comma integer b, something like this, and return a plus b, like that it return the logic. So similarly it written for the subtraction point of view also, a minus b. Okay, fine. Now this is class of ABC provided implemented the interface. Now can I do this real operation? Means yes, 100%. Now the moment I am passing always two values to the addition method to the ABC class perspective, yes, I will get always solution of addition. So the real operations I can do right now. That means in this case interface acting as a specification, not a solution. And based on that specification, you provided the solution, you provided the implementation, and by using that solution, you are doing the real operations. So in this case, with specification, you cannot do anything. But based on the specification, whenever you implemented something, you can do the real operation. Now, one more XYZ class came into the picture. They also provided their own solution based on this interface. Okay, so now here this class is XYZ class, something like that. I'm just taking a point. Now this is all about an XYZ class. Now here also you can do the real operations like addition and subtraction by passing two values, all these things you can do that. So for a specification, you may have multiple solutions based on your own ideas. Then you can do the real operations. So that means here also you can do real operations, here also you can do real operations, right? But by using directly specification, you cannot do anything. Similarly, JPA also did same thing. Java team released a specification into the market and they are explaining about the benefits of the ORM features and all, but they are not given the solution. They given only instructions to they released only instructions, rules, regulations, guidelines to the market, but they are not given proper solution. But what some third party companies did, here it is, by understanding that specification point of view, they started providing implementation, and those are all called as ORM frameworks, and those are all called as, now that is what called as Hibernate, here it is. And then similarly, not only Hibernate, the more popular one is Hibernate. Something we have IBAT is top link. IBAT is my bad, top link, something is there. Okay. So, but the more popular and majority one people will use Hibernate only. So Hibernate is implemented by a company called as JBoss company. JBoss company. So then IBAT is something, I think top link is implemented by the Eclipse. We are using Eclipse, right? Eclipse organization. They are implemented this ORM framework. So IBAT is someone else, something else like that, etc. etc. You have lot of frameworks. I mean, few different companies implemented different frameworks based on the JPA specification. So now these are all called as ORM frameworks. Now tell me, Hibernate, the framework, whatever we are understanding, I mean, whatever the word we are using every day in Hibernate, most of the times, this Hibernate is a ORM framework is implemented based on the JPA specification. Based on the JPA specification. Based on the JPA specification. So now in this case, in a real-time Java project point of view, so I said right now, as a developer, you have to take care of all this JPA specification implementation. Now already, so if as a, for example, assume you are working for a project called as ICICI Bank and you decided like you want to go with JPA functionalities. Okay, as part of your JPA. But the moment if you want to decide at JPA, if you started providing implementation to the JPA, that itself will take 1 year time. Then how, when you will write all remaining ICICI business requirement functionalities? So that's why in this case, what we can do in the market already, the JPA specification solutions as a ORM frameworks already available in the market as a free of cost. These are all called as open source frameworks. So what is open source is nothing but free. Without license, you can use them officially in our application. That's what called as open source. Okay, so if you are there are something like enterprise applications, enterprise things will be there. That means money will be charged. If you are using without, I mean, fake one or maybe without money or something duplicate things, then it will be a trademark, I mean, license issues and all these things. You will face some issues. They can go for some cases, all these things. But open source is all about free. So now Hibernate is a open source framework. JBoss implemented and they released as a open source. They said like, okay, everyone can use it. So now that's why what people will do is when already in the market, already JPA implementations are there as a ORM frameworks. Now instead of we are writing our own solutions, what we are doing here it is in our project to achieve the JPA specifications, we are importing the Hibernate framework. Hibernate framework. So that means as a developer now, whatever I said a year earlier, based on the JPA implement specification, you have to provide the implementation, right? Like taking the Java object conversion and then sending to the SQL and again database giving something back and converting those to list of objects. These are all activities generally done by this area. Now that area I said earlier we have to implement, but now already in the market, lot of open source frameworks are available which are implemented based on the JPA specification itself, like Hibernate, Hibat is toppling, okay, MyBat is something like that. There are so many things are there. Now, when already Hibernate is there, if I am using Hibernate is nothing but what? You are using JPA implementation. JPA features implementation. JPA features implementation into your project. Now, simply you take and Hibernate into your ICSA project. Now you will start writing the regular business requirements. You will start requirement implementation based on the things. Now you want to add a customer information. Add a customer information. The moment you submitted from the front end, some customer forms generally will form, right? So the moment the button clicked on the submit button on the front end, all the data will come as a object to Java level. And what you are doing, the same Java object, you will give it to the, I mean, there are some manipulation is available. It's not like regular Java object. Finally, you will take that customer information as a Java object and that Java object you will pass to the Hibernate framework. Like save customer information. You will give an instruction like save and you given all the customer information as a Java object oriented. So you are saying like customer ID is 1 and followed by ABC and so on, so etc. etc. All the information you given as a Java object and you are giving an instruction as save. Then what Hibernate framework is doing in this case is it will understand, okay, Dilip, you sent instruction as save and you want to save all this information in the table called as customer table in the database, right? Like, okay, assume there is a table in the customer table in the database. So it's a database. Maybe it is a Oracle, MySQL, whatever it is. That's why I'm using generic terminology database. Now here you have a table called as customer table and all. And customer table. And you have something like customer ID, all these records. So columns are ID, name, etc. 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 Then what will happen? The moment you given this object and instruction to the Hibernate, so there is a concept available, entity classes and all. So that means some rules we have to follow as Java developer. Then what Hibernate will understand here it is, okay, Dilip, I'll save it like that. It will read this object data like one ABC, all this information, and it will generate an SQL query. So who is generating SQL query? Hibernate framework generating an SQL query. Hibernate framework generating an SQL query like insert into customer values of 1 comma ABC, like that it will generate an SQL query. So what's happening? The Java object based on the instruction and SQL queries, Hibernate framework generated an SQL query. So Hibernate framework generated an SQL query. And once that SQL query is generated, Now finally this SQL query is sent to the database. Now database can understand SQL language. SQL language. So database is executed this query automatically in the table level. One ABC data is inserted. One ABC data is. But if you go to the JDBC point of view, there is no point of writing only object oriented solutions. You have to send, you are sending directly SQL queries. Here, one layer is added. Okay, one layer is added based on the JPA framework. One more layer is added. Okay, ORM framework layer or ORM layer. And then as a developer, you are feeling like you are writing only 100% Java oriented solutions, but internally that layer is taking that Java object and instruction into consideration and generating an SQL query, and that SQL query is sent to the DBE. One layer is added here. But as a Java developer point of view, whenever you written a customer.java, whatever it is, customer db.java, whatever it is, you are not written any SQL query today here. But you are feeling like without writing SQL query, database operation is happening. But internally, this query generation, query creation, query formation is taken care by the Hibernate framework. So what is the advantage of this? So why JPA is doing that is, that's what you are making all 100% object oriented solutions. So that means as a Java developer, sometimes you no need to write SQL queries. You can reduce the writing SQL queries. But to make sure how to pass this instruction, how to create this Java object is all about our JPA training. That is what you are going to learn as part of next 1 week, 10 days. So to send an object, it's a Java object only. Some extra information you have to add to this object. And to send this, okay, what? This instruction like save, delete. If you send something like delete instruction, then based on the delete query will be created and record will be deleted. For example, after some point of time, you want to delete a customer record. Then you given one and you said you sent a delete instruction like that. Then what Hibernate framework will understand? Okay, Dilip, let me generate an SQL query like what it will do. Internally, it will generate an SQL query like delete, okay, from customer where id equal to 1, like that it will generate an SQL query, and again this SQL query will be sent to the DB. Hibernate sending that SQL query to DB and executed. Finally, your record is deleted. But as a developer, you are not sent real SQL query. You sent you only delete by ID 1, something like that. You given only Java language instruction. But internally an SQL query is generated and something is happened and finally data is deleted. So 0% you written SQL queries, but all SQL operations are happening on the database level. So internally this JPA frameworks or ORM frameworks or Hibernate, all these things are entering into the picture. They are taking care of this conversion and all. So it will simplify the process of writing applications. Once you know all these things, you will write very less amount of SQL queries, and okay, you will not write 1% of SQL queries also. You will make everything as a Java object oriented solutions, but not SQL oriented solutions. So that is how the JPA is introduced into market by Java team. So their idea here it is why Java developers has to take care of SQL queries for basic things also, why they have to send always SQL queries to here. Why can't we implement an abstraction layer, an abstracted layer, so that developers will write only objects and they will pass instructions, but that abstracted layer will take care of query formation, query generation, execution with respect to database levels. So as a developer, now tomorrow, that's what yesterday I said one thing, if you observe or not. Yeah, here I said what tomorrow once you know the JPA framework, you will write one single word called as single method instruction called as find all. So this one method will give you all, it will do lot of things internally. So that means it will select a star from product, like that it will execute a query. So query formation will happen, query execution will happen. Once query is executed, the result set is converted into a list of array list of objects. Three things will happen in this case: query generation, query execution, and that result is converted into array list. Three activities will happen with this one word. That much less amount of code you are going to write going further in the JPA. So observe here, you are not written any SQL query. Simply, you will give this instruction to the div ORM framework or JPA framework. Hey, I want all the objects from the product table. So then automatically ORM framework will go to the DB and it will go to the product table. It will execute that query, select a star from product. All these records will come and all records are going to be again one record converted as one Java object, and all those Java objects again collected as a list of objects. These many things are happening in single word. So that is how it is simplifying the process of writing the Java logic, and it's all about you are making every time always 100% Java oriented solutions. So slowly we will understand. You cannot get within one day. So how to? But the point here it is, that's what I said. But it's not like it's all object oriented things only. But here some few things we have to write something like there are some major concept available, entity classes. So that means here we will write some concept called as entity classes and repositories, JPA repositories. So this is what JPA repositories. So these two things we will understand as part of our JPA frame. So that means these two things are very important as a JPA framework point of view. So we have to understand what is an entity class, what is a repository. By using entity classes and repositories, we will achieve this behavior. So that means without writing single line of SQL query, you can do all database operations if you are using JPA frameworks into your project. Now, in this overall process, I said one thing is if you want to use JPA into your project, you have to write your own solution. That it will take 1 year. That's why nobody will do all this thing. So people will select already existing frameworks who is already implemented the JPA specification. They will take that framework into project and they will start. Like Hibernate, they will take into the picture. Now, what about the Spring Boot JPA? In this overall process now, it's all about we are going to learn Spring Boot JPA module, right? So in this case, what happened here it is, on a high level point of view, I'll give you. So Spring Boot also what it did here it is, when you are taking Spring Boot application into your project, what these guys did here it is, Java, by default Java only everything, Java language plus they take an Hibernate also. Understand the point guys. They take an Hibernate. So that means nothing but they are taking ORM functionality, nothing but JPA functionality. Now the Spring Boot JPA module implemented like this. Internally, they are along with Java language, they taken Hibernate framework help, and as well as Spring Boot also added some extra features. When comparing with Hibernate, framework you are using individually into your project to do database operations, okay, even what Spring Boot did here it is, they are added some more features, extra features on top of Hibernate. So that means now the entire Spring Boot JPA module is implemented with the help of Hibernate only. So that means what is the point you have to understand here it is, the moment you are learning Spring Boot JPA module is nothing but internally you are learning Hibernate also. So if you are using Spring Boot JPA module into your project is nothing but you are using Hibernate also. The reason is they Spring Boot JPA module, they take in consideration of Java JPA. So Spring Boot also implemented JPA specification, but not 100% directly from the JPA. What these guys are did here it is, already Hibernate implemented the JPA. So what these guys are idea here it is, already Hibernate is there in the market as an open source. They are already implemented the JPA specification. It's all like inheritance point of view. Now what Spring Boot did? Spring Boot is inherited from the Hibernate framework and added some extra features as part of the some extra features, and they are calling it as a Spring Boot JPA module. Now this is what called as Spring Boot JPA module. So they are inherited again. See how cleverly Spring Boot is doing in this case. Spring Boot not directly implemented the JPA specification. Understand the point. Then Spring Boot not written everything on its own from the JPA specification, so that Spring Boot we are using into our project. So that Spring Boot features we are going to use into our projects. So finally Spring Boot module we will use into our applications. But the point here it is how Spring Boot JPA module, this is all about our applications. So our projects level we will use Spring Boot JPA module, that's fine. But the Spring Boot JPA is not implemented directly JPA interface, JPA specification. This guys thought like when already something is there like open source Hibernate and all, what these guys are did here it is, they are taken reference from the Hibernate, they inherited from the Hibernate, and there whatever the small challenges or some small problems available with respect to Hibernate framework, they are simplified all those things into Spring Boot level, Spring Boot JPA module level. So that means now the moment you are using Spring Boot module into your application is nothing but you are getting Hibernate also into your application, guys. So you are going to get benefit of Hibernate also. So you are going to get benefit of Hibernate also, because Spring Boot implemented again on Spring Boot JPA module is implemented again with the help of Hibernate framework internally. And they added some more logic on top of JPA and Hibernate combination. And finally, they released into market as a Spring Boot JPA. So that means what you have to understand here it is the moment you are implementing, you are working on any application, you are getting automatically Hibernate features also. Hibernate features into your application. And when comparing with Hibernate, definitely Spring Boot JPA is having more features because they are internally taking Hibernate as a base and they are added few more features like okay, and they are releasing into market as a Spring Boot JPA. So if you are using Spring Boot JPA means you will get more features when comparing with Hibernate in your application. So that's why the moment you added Spring Boot application module setup, Spring Boot JPA module to your project means you have to take care of, then you will get all these Hibernate functionalities, JPA functionalities and extra features whatever implemented by the Spring or Spring Boot. Those are all things coming into your application. So this is the story about Spring Boot JPA module on theory basis, guys. So any doubts you are having until this point? So that's why this small module will be called as ORM module also. The reason is why finally ultimately you are etching ORM features only. So that's why Spring Boot JPA module, sometimes people will consider it as a ORM module also. So when you listen as a ORM JPA, both are same point of view, consider it. And here, so that means tomorrow morning when you created our application, the moment you added Spring Boot JPA module to your project, you are getting automatically JPA plus Hibernate plus Spring Boot own features which is implemented as part of JPA. These are all features you will get into your application automatically. But to get this level, this is the story happened behind. What is JPA? So what we understood right now is JPA is from the Java language. So if you see here, JPA JPA stands for Java Persistence API. Okay, nowadays it is calling as the Jakarta Persistence API. It's a very old thing. Yeah. See, Java Persistence API. From where, guys? Oracle. That means it's all from the Java home only, from the Java language only. These are all things came. Spring Data. So this is official documentation of Spring framework. Spring Data JPA. So what they are saying, see here. Spring Data JPA is part of. Okay, leave about it is saying like JPA. It's all about an implementation of Java Persistence API concept. Spring powered applications and all implementing data access layer. So we will see all these things. Features, sophisticated build repositories. That's what I said, right? If you see here, yeah, this is where I given one small thing where repositories, this repositories. So we will understand by using entity classes and repositories, we will do all this behavior like sending objects and then converting SQL queries and all this. To do that, we have to know about entity classes and repositories. That's what they are talking about. Repository based solutions and all. We will understand what is repository. At the rate query, we will understand all these things. My point here it is. Yeah, I proved JPA is nothing but from the Java language point of view. They released by the Java. JPA Wikipedia, Jakarta persistence. Yeah, the recent name is Jakarta persistence, also known as Java persistence API earlier, but now it is calling as Jakarta. So if you see here, JEE means Java Enterprise Edition. So from Java Enterprise Edition only JPA is there. Advanced Java. Simply I can say like from advanced Java we will learn SQL all this, right? So from there only you have JPA also. One of the API as part of advanced Java Enterprise Edition is nothing but JPA. So finally it is from the Java. That is what you have to understand. And it is a specification. It's not an implementation. So those things also you can find out from here. See, programming JEE, programming interface is a specification that describes the management of relational data in Java applications. That is what I am saying from last 1 hour. So what I'm trying to say here it is, that's what. The JPA is encouraging all about the concept of object-oriented model programming. Object relational mapping concepts is achieved by the JPA framework, and it is only specification, not the solutions. We will understand this JPQL and all, I'll tell you later. So first JPA released into 2006, and after that Hibernate came into the picture. Yeah, entity classes we will write like this only. We will see that. Motivation, Java data, state service data. 2.0, how many versions they released into the market? They are talking about all these things. Okay, so this is all about JPA, but see, yeah, here Eclipse link, Hibernate. This is what I said. Hibernate implemented, Eclipse is implemented. The moment yeah. Okay, if you come back here, JPA version they released. Who implemented? Eclipse link. That's what I said. Top link. I think these are all ORM frameworks, guys. So JBoss implemented the Hibernate. JBoss is the organization. They implemented Hibernate framework from the JPA. IBM also implemented, Eclipse also implemented Top Link. And if you open JPA, ObjectDB, something like that. There are so many things, but don't worry. Nowadays, the more popular one is Hibernate only. I mean, everyone will use mostly Hibernate, and that too in Spring Boot. By default, they given support of Hibernate only. So Hibernate framework, Hibernate framework, Hibernate framework. So in the market, top race Hibernate is there, and that too Spring Boot also internally taking Hibernate framework help only. Okay, so whether it is true or not, let's see here. I'll just show you, and tomorrow, step by step, we will see the process of making the coding and all. Again, point by point, we will see. First, we will create a Spring JPA application. How to do that? Let's see here. Spring Boot. It's a very simple. If you are doing in the Spring Boot, okay, give your project name. Come back here. What you have to select? JPA. Spring Data JPA. And the moment you are working with the database, I said you need always driver jar file. So driver means which driver, which database you are using. I am using Oracle. That's why I am taking Oracle driver. And yesterday I teached you one concept called as Lombok, guys. Okay, so yesterday class, whoever joined or whoever listened, right? So I said Lombok is the purpose of what? It's all about dealing with the Poja classes. So I mean, I'll take Lombok later. Okay, later I'll just involve that later. So that means Spring Boot also by default coming up with a dependency called as Lombok. In case if you want to use Lombok in your Spring Boot application, use it for only for the purpose of automatic generation of the setter, getters, toString methods, all this. Okay, but it's I said already very clearly in the yesterday session, Lombok is nowhere related to Spring Java. It's a third-party library to deal with setter, getter methods and as well as constructors, toString methods point of view. In case if you want same behavior in your application also, you can do that. Okay, so Going further, I will not write setter getters. I will take help of Lombok only. Now see here, where it is gone. Yeah, JPA application. Come back here, Maven dependencies. Observe the jar files. What is this? Hibernate commons, Hibernate core. So that means internally, what I said right now, Spring Boot JPA module taken help of JPA plus Hibernate, and they added some more features on their one, and finally they are calling it as a Spring Boot JPA module. So that means they are taking help of internally Hibernate. So that's why you are able to see Hibernate jar files here. Not only here, I will prove going further also. Once we written some examples also, I said Hibernate will generate the SQL queries, right? So I'll prove this point also. The moment you are sending the object, internally Hibernate framework will generate the SQL query based on the instructions, whatever I explained today here, theory point of view. Everything I'll prove practical point of view. Everything I'll show you proofs also. So that I'll show you later. And what you have to understand from here it is. So I proved Hibernate being used internally. That's why you are able to see Hibernate jar files. And Jakarta persistence API. See here, Jakarta persistence API, Jakarta transaction API. It's all about Jakarta means whatever you are seeing here it is Jakarta annotation API. These are all related to the Spring, sorry, that JPA API released by the Java team. So the moment Jakarta persistence is, this is all about JPA jar files. To get that specification, to get the predefined interfaces from the JPA point of view. So JPA jar files you are able to see here it is. And then if you observe here, Spring JDBC, and yesterday I said one more point. See, ultimately whether you are using JDBC, JPA, whatever it is, database perspective always SQL is happening. Database level, finally SQL query is executing. Whether you are using JPA, JDBC and all, ultimately database level SQL query is executing. But in JDBC you are sending direct SQL queries. In JPA you are sending objects, but ultimately your object is converted to SQL. So I said one more point. JPA module again built on top of JDBC, but in a different ideology. But internally they are using JDBC. So that means if you are using JDBC means, sorry, JPA means you can achieve the JDBC functionalities also. So you can get the that JDBC template also whenever you want, in case if you require. So see here ORM module. I said ORM, right? So they are using some Spring ORM module, Spring ORM. Like that, you can see all these things here. Spring Boot data JPA. Spring Boot data JPA status and all. If you observe the pom.xml file, see if I'm opening yesterday JDBC one and I'm opening today's JPA one. Understand the pom.xml file. I said right. The moment you added any modules, starter will be added. Starter is nothing but group of dependencies. If you see here, Spring Boot starter data JPA. This is today's. If you go to the JDBC one, Spring Boot starter JDBC, data JDBC. So there is no JPA in this case, but here the starter of JPA. So that means it is always having JPA jar file. See, if I added Lombok, what happened guys here? It's automatically Lombok jar file also coming into the picture now. Whatever I discussed yesterday, it's a real time concept nowadays. So whether you gone through that session, go it. If you show, so Lombok. Yeah, see here, Lombok jar file. This is what yesterday I added manually in our yesterday session. But today you can take Lombok jar file directly from the Spring Starter also. So that you can easily write Pojo classes. You can easily deal with the Pojo classes going through. So please listen yesterday class. It's a good concept. And that is all for today. So tomorrow we will see how we are achieving the ORM. I said right where it is. So the tomorrow onwards the programming will start. So I said every record, the moment you are sending object, it is inserted as record. The moment you are getting records, those are all things comes as a record, Java objects, right? So how we are achieving all this point of view, tomorrow onwards we will see what is an entity class, what is repository and all. So tomorrow onwards the programming will start. So any doubts until this part, you can ask me. So we can connect tomorrow.